It is a Saturday morning. Wei is 34 years old, a logistics manager in Tampines. His lease renews in 3 months. His landlord just messaged asking if he wants to stay another year at $3,800 a month. Wei does not reply. He and his wife have been talking about buying for 2 years. Every time they try to calculate it, they stop halfway. Their friends all own. His mother asks at every family dinner why he is still paying someone else's mortgage. His colleague at work, same age, same salary, bought a resale 4-room HDB in Bedok 3 years ago. The colleague tells Wei he is throwing money away. Wei does not know if that is true. Neither does his colleague. He just sounds like he does. This video runs the actual 20-year math. Not a pitch for buying, not a pitch for renting. The real numbers from both sides, including the ones nobody puts in the brochure. Start with what it actually costs to buy. Wei and his wife earn $12,000 a month combined. That is almost exactly the Singapore national median for a resident household. $12,446, confirmed by the Department of Statistics in February 2026. They are not rich. They are not struggling. They are the average Singaporean household. They want a 4-room flat in Tampines. The national median for HDB resale 4-room flats in Q1 2026 is $498,000. In Tampines, slightly above that, around $520,000. That number feels manageable. It is not the real number. Here is what moves on day 1. The minimum down payment is 25%, $130,000. With an HDB concessionary loan at 2.6%, the full 25% can come from CPF ordinary account. With a bank loan, and banks in June 2026 are offering 2-year fixed rates as low as 1.5%, 5% must be paid in cash. That is $26,000 cash before they have seen a single key. Then buyer's stamp duty. On $520,000, 1% on the first $180,000, 2% on the next $180,000, 3% on the remaining $160,000. Total BSD, $12,600. As Singapore citizens buying their first property, they pay 0 additional buyer's stamp duty. That exemption alone saves them over $10,000 compared to a permanent resident making the same purchase. More on that later. Then, renovation. A resale 4-room HDB in 2026 costs between $35,000 and $65,000 to renovate. The BCA Building Cost Index rose 53% between 2019 and 2026. Assume Wei keeps it lean, $40,000. Total mobilized before they live there a single day. Down payment plus BSD plus renovation. $130,000 from CPF, plus $12,600 in BSD, plus $40,000 in renovation. $182,600. Gone on day 1. Hold that number. Now the monthly picture. A $520,000 HDB flat on an HDB loan at 2.6% over 25 years carries a monthly mortgage payment of approximately $1,750. Under MAS rules, the mortgage servicing ratio for HDB purchases cannot exceed 30% of gross monthly income. On $12,000, 30% is $3,600. Wei clears it comfortably. With the bank loan at 1.5%, the payment drops to approximately $1,560, $190 less per month. Over 20 years, that is $45,600 in saved interest. But bank loans carry refinancing risk when the fixed period ends and cannot absorb rate surprises the way the HDB loan can. The HDB loan is the safer floor. Property tax. A 4-room HDB in Tampines with an annual value around $11,000 pays approximately $100 per year. Almost nothing. Town council fees. Around $60 per month. Total monthly cost to own. Approximately $1,820. Now rent. In Q1 2026, the median rent for a 4-room HDB flat in a mature estate is $2,600 a month. The mortgage on that same flat is $1,820. Buying is cheaper than renting, by $780 a month. That feels like the answer. It is not. Here is the number most people never calculate. When Wei puts $182,600 into that flat, it stops working in any other form. It is locked in concrete and plaster and town council minutes. It cannot be redeemed in 3 days if his mother needs a hospital. It cannot follow him to a new city if his company relocates him. It earns returns only in one direction, through property price appreciation, and only when he sells. If Wei had kept renting, that same $182,600 goes into CSPX, the Irish domiciled iShares Core S&P 500 UCIT SETF. Why Irish domiciled? Because Singapore investors holding the US domiciled equivalent, VOO SPY, pay 30% withholding tax on dividends. CSPX pays 15%. No capital gains tax in Singapore. No US estate tax on UCITS funds. Total expense ratio 0.07%. Bought through interactive brokers for less than $2 a trade. The S&P 500 has returned an average of 7% per year in real terms over 50 years. At 7%, $182,600 invested in 2026 becomes approximately $707,000 in 20 years. $707,000. That is the opportunity cost sitting inside the flat. But the flat appreciates. That is the counter-argument every property owner makes. And they are right. Over the past 20 years, HDB resale prices have risen 177%, roughly 5.5% per year. But that number includes the 2020 to 2023 spike that added 40% in 3 years. Going forward, most analysts forecast 2 to 4% annual growth. And here's why the lower end is more likely. 13,484 HDB flats reach minimum occupation period in 2026, nearly double the 6,973 that reached MOP in 2025. That is 13,000 motivated sellers entering the market at once. More supply, slower price growth. At a conservative 3% annual appreciation, Wei's $520,000 flat is worth approximately $940,000 in 20 years. The gain on paper, $420,000, but not in Wei's pocket. When Wei sells, every dollar withdrawn from CPF for the down payment and monthly repayments must be returned to CPF, plus accrued interest at 2.5% per year, compounded for every year it was out. The CPF board does not negotiate this. It applies to every residential property in Singapore without exception. Over 25 years of mortgage payments, the CPF principal withdrawn, plus 2.5 decades of accrued interest, represents a substantial slice of the sale proceeds. Money that goes back into CPF, not into Wei's bank account. Then, agent commissions on the sale. 1 to 2% of the transaction price. On $940,000, that is $9,000 to $19,000. The net cash Wei actually receives after the sale, after CPF refund and commission, is closer to $640,000, not $940, $640. Now run both paths to year 20, side by side. Wei buys. He puts $182,600 into the flat. His monthly mortgage is $1,820. His rent would have been $2,600, so buying saves him $780 every month. He invests that $780 monthly into CSPX at 7%. Over 20 years, that monthly investment grows to approximately $431,000. At year 20, he sells. Net cash $640,000 plus investment portfolio $431,000. Total position $1,071,000. Wei rents. He puts that same $182,600 into CSPX on day one. At 7% over 20 years, $707,000. He pays $2,600 a month rent instead of $1,820, so he has no monthly surplus to invest compared to the buyer. He ends year 20 with $707,000 and no property. The buyer finishes with $1,071,000. The renter finishes with $707,000. Over 20 years, the disciplined buyer comes out $364,000 ahead. That is the answer for Wei's exact scenario. But three things can reverse it completely. The first is appreciation. Priya is 37. She bought a 4-room resale HDB in Sengkang in 2019 at $430,000. By 2026, it is worth $680,000. 58% appreciation in 7 years, riding the exact wave analysts say will not repeat at the same speed. She feels vindicated. She is vindicated. But Priya's outcome was partly timing, not just decision. Run the same buyer's model at 1.5% annual appreciation instead of 3%. Plausible in a market with record MOP supply and BTO output rising. At 1.5%, Wei's flat is worth $707,000 at year 20. Net after CPF refund and commission, closer to $430,000. Total buyer position, $430,000 plus the $431,000 from monthly investments, $861,000. The renter still has $707,000. The buyer is still ahead, but by only $154,000 instead of $364,000. After 20 years of illiquidity, insurance, maintenance risk, and no optionality, at 1.5%, buying barely wins. At 1%, it loses. Property appreciation is the single variable that makes buying brilliant or merely tolerable. And in Singapore in 2026, with 13,000 MOP flats entering the market simultaneously, and the government explicitly growing BTO supply, the 2020 to 2023 appreciation rate is not a reliable baseline. The second is the holding period. The upfront costs, BSD, renovation, legal fees, are sunk on day one. They need time to be recovered through appreciation and monthly savings. At the numbers above, Wei's break-even point, where buying pulls ahead of renting, is approximately 7 to 8 years. Below 7 years, renting wins. Above 7 years, buying wins incrementally. The MOP locks Wei in for 5 years, but the financial break-even is at 7. That 2-year gap matters. Anyone buying with a 5 to 8 year horizon and assuming they will sell at MOP is almost certainly worse off than if they had rented. Here's what makes this harder. Nobody at 34 knows with certainty that they will stay in Singapore for 8 years. Job markets shift, companies relocate, marriages change, families grow. The people most likely to sell before break-even are not reckless. They are people who plan to stay and then did not. The third destroys upgraders and PRs entirely. Wei is a Singapore citizen. First property, 0 additional buyer stamp duty. His colleague Jason, same income, same age, but a Singapore permanent resident, buys the same flat. ABSD for a PR on a first property, 5%. On $520,000, that is $26,000. Cash. On top of BSD, on top of the down payment. Jason's break-even period extends. His 20-year advantage shrinks. And then there is the upgrade. Hafiz is 43. He and his wife sold their Bedok HDB after MOP and are looking at a $1,200,000 condo in District 15. As Singapore citizens buying a second property, they pay 20% ABSD, that is $240,000, in cash, before they have signed a single page of the sale agreement. That $240,000 in CSPX at 7% over 15 years becomes approximately $662,000. $662,000. Paid to IRAS on the day of purchase. Gone. Hafiz's condo needs to appreciate substantially just to make the ABSD worthwhile. Most agents do not put this in the spreadsheet. They show the projected resale value. They do not show what the $240,000 would have become if it had not gone to stamp duty. The math for second properties in Singapore after 2023 ABSD rates is hard. Not impossible, hard. Now the part nobody in property sales will ever tell you. Every HDB flat runs on a 99-year lease. When that lease ends, the flat returns to the state. No compensation. Zero. The land goes back to HDB, which surrenders it to the Singapore Land Authority. The flat ceases to exist as an asset. A flat built in 1990 has 63 years remaining today. A flat built in 2000 has 73 years. The difference between a flat with 80 years left and one with 60 years left is not a number. It is a different buyer pool. At 60 years remaining, banks begin restricting loan tenures. At 40 years, bank loans become severely constrained. At 30 years, CPF usage for purchase is no longer available. The next buyer cannot use CPF to buy from Way. The pool of people who can purchase shrinks to those who can pay cash. Prices fall to match the available buyers. The decline is not gradual, it accelerates. Property research shows leasehold flats at 50 years remaining trade at roughly 74% of equivalent freehold values. Below 50 years, the discount widens every passing quarter. Only 4% of HDB flats have ever been selected for SERS, the government en bloc scheme that gives owners a replacement flat and an exit at compensation value. 4%. The other 96% will run the lease down. Assuming your flat gets selected is not a financial plan. It is a lottery. Wei is 34. If he buys a 20-year-old resale flat today with 79 years remaining, that flat has 59 years of lease left when he sells at 54. Still in the safe zone. The math above holds. But if Wei buys a 30-year-old flat today, cheaper, better location, mature estate, that flat has 69 years remaining now and 49 years remaining when he sells at 54. 49 years, already approaching the zone where buyer financing starts to tighten and the pool of eligible purchasers starts to shrink. Two flats, same price today, completely different exit stories 20 years from now. When Wei filters HDB listings tonight, the first thing he checks is the lease commencement year. Not the floor, not the renovation, the lease. Now Vivian. Vivian is 41 years old. Senior manager at a bank in Raffles Place. She earns $9,000 a month after CPF deductions. She has been a Singapore citizen since birth. She can afford to buy. She has chosen not to. She has been renting a 3-room HDB in Queenstown for $2,200 a month for 7 years. Her portfolio sits at $214,000, split between CSPX and VWRA, the Vanguard FTSE All-World UCI TSETF, also Irish domiciled. She contributes $1,500 every month. Her SRS account is maxed at $15,300 every December, invested into Singapore REITs and Singapore savings bonds. Vivian does not own a flat. She is not losing. Here is what she has that Wei does not. Flexibility. If Vivian's bank offers her a role in Hong Kong, she leaves in 60 days. There is no flat to sell, no MOP to wait out, no CPF accrued interest to calculate. Her $214,000 portfolio fits in her phone. Liquidity. Last year, Vivian's mother needed emergency surgery and a private hospital stay that cost $38,000. Vivian redeemed $30,000 from her portfolio in 3 business days. A flat owner facing the same bill has equity in the walls and nothing accessible. Diversification. Vivian's net worth is not 90% concentrated in one illiquid leasehold asset whose value depends on HDB supply decisions, government cooling measures, and which MRT line extension gets approved in the next master plan. Is Vivian ahead of Way in 20 years? Probably not. We showed the buyer's math, a $364,000 advantage at 3% appreciation. Vivian knows this, she accepts it. Because what she gains in flexibility, liquidity, and psychological freedom is worth the cost to her. And she has done the calculation explicitly, not by accident. The dangerous version of Vivian is the one who rents indefinitely, never invests the difference, and arrives at 55 with savings account money and no property and no portfolio. That version is genuinely losing, not because she rented, because she did not invest while renting. Renting is not throwing money away. Renting without investing is. Back to Wei. His landlord is still waiting for a reply. Here's what Wei does before he answers. Tonight, he opens the CPF website and runs the housing calculator. He models the total CPF withdrawal over a 25-year mortgage on $520,000, principal plus the accrued interest that comes due at the point of sale. He then runs the same amount through a compound interest calculator at 2.5%. What that money would have grown to if it had stayed in CPF for retirement. The difference is the real retirement cost of using CPF for housing. Most buyers never look at this number. Wei will. Then he checks the lease commencement year on every flat he has bookmarked. He wants a minimum of 80 years remaining, so the flat still has 60 years left when he sells at 54, clear of the financing cliff. Then he looks at his monthly budget with the mortgage in place. The mortgage replaces $3,800 in rent with $1,820 in mortgage. That frees up $1,980 a month. He commits, in writing, to redirect $1,200 of that into a monthly RSP into CSPX from month 1. The remaining $780 goes to a CPF voluntary top-up every January, $8,000 in annual tax relief, and a guaranteed 4% return on the SSA balance. The question is never rent or buy. The question is, what happens to the difference? Here is the 20-year answer in plain language. A Singapore citizen at 34 buying a $520,000 HDB resale flat, holding for 20 years, and investing the monthly savings from owning versus renting, ends up approximately $360,000 ahead of a renter who invested the upfront capital but had no monthly surplus. That advantage is real. It is not guaranteed. It depends on 3% annual appreciation, a holding period beyond 7 years, and not buying at maximum affordability, so the investment margin survives. For PRs facing 5% ABSD, for upgraders facing 20% ABSD, for anyone stretching to a $1.5 million private condo, where the mortgage eliminates the RSP and the SRS and the CPF top-up simultaneously, the calculation reverses. The property still appreciates, but the retirement machinery that should be running in parallel shuts down. The flat grows. Everything else does not. The buyer who wins in Singapore is not the one who bought the most expensive property they could afford. It is the one who bought below the ceiling, kept the margin working, and never stopped compounding everything that was not in the walls. 20 years from now, the most expensive thing Wei did will not be whether he replied yes or no to that landlord's message. It will be what he did with the money that was not going to housing. Every month for 20 years. Property wins in Singapore. CSPX also wins. The only path that loses, in both directions, is the one where the margin sits in a DBS savings account at 1%, while inflation reduces it quietly to something worth less than Wei remembers putting in. What is your housing decision doing to your retirement right now? Not in theory, In practice, after the mortgage or the rent clears, how much is still working? If this changed how you see it, subscribe. There is more coming.